Welcome to Mocktails and Masterpieces with the Indianapolis Chamber Orchestra. Today's episode is sponsored by Anthony Team Realty.
My name is Aaron Diehl. I'm a jazz pianist. I won the 2011 Cole Porter Fellowship with the American Pianists Association. And I've gotten to know Indianapolis over the years, really since probably 2010. I'm a Midwesterner from Columbus, Ohio, born and raised, moved to New York in 2003 and been here ever since. I live in Brooklyn now. And I'm really excited to be returning to Indianapolis, performing the Zodiac Suite by the great Mary Lou Williams. So my grandfather was a jazz musician. He was a trombonist and also played keyboard, piano. I grew up in a family that really valued music, of course, with my grandfather. My mother and my father both collected music. They had a ton of CDs and some vinyl when I was growing up. And my mother one time recalled a story where she and my dad took me to some kind of event or a party or something. And there was a live band playing, and I probably was a toddler, maybe like 2 years old. And I was completely pacified and enchanted by the sound of the music. And my mom said I was just staring at the musicians and just watching them and listening to the performance. And when I was, I'd say about 5 years old, my parents got a piano in their living room, and my grandfather would occasionally come over and play it, and I'd be curious about what he was doing. And I'd start sort of noodling around on the keys from time to time in their living room. And so I think they had the prudence to enroll me into formal piano lessons. And that was really the start of my musical journey with piano specifically. And my first teacher was a lady named Joanne Hall. And I was with her for about, I don't know, maybe about a year or two. I'm not quite sure. And this was at the Capital University Community Music School in Bexley. And there was a point where Ms. Hall acknowledged that I had reached a certain point in my studies with her, and she wanted me to continue and to advance onto another instructor. So ultimately, I landed with a wonderful woman with whom I still keep in touch. Her name's Paula Radzinski. And really with Mrs. Radzinski, I'd say that a lot of my love for classical music really blossomed, including Bach and Beethoven, Schumann. And there was a point, though, in probably my high school years where I was really fascinated with the idea of improvisation, specifically jazz improvisation, because my grandfather was a jazz musician. I wanted to start to investigate that whole realm. And so there were a number of opportunities that I had in Columbus, including first of all, the Columbus Youth Jazz Orchestra, which was led by Todd Stoll, who's actually in New York now. He's an education director at Jazz and Lincoln Center. But Todd really gave me the first opportunity to play in a big band setting with my peers, other than my high school jazz band, which, the level was a varying range in terms of level, but the Columbus Youth Jazz Orchestra was really a very strong high school orchestra. Was students from different parts of Central Ohio that had to audition to get in. And so that was sort of I'd say about 14 or 15 was my start of my journey with jazz. And then through Todd, I met Wynton Marsalis, and Wynton mentored me, from a young age, and he encouraged me to enroll or audition for Juilliard, and ultimately I got in. Yeah, I've been fortunate to have a number of teachers and mentors and people who really encouraged me and sort of recognized my own love and passion for music.
That's really exciting. The Zodiac Suite. So I'll be honest, it's new to me. We kind of came out of a conversation we had with our creative partner and Matthew. We were talking about jazz and how we might, play something with the chamber orchestra. The instrumentation is somewhat a challenge. There's not a whole lot of music written. This was the exact conversation we had. We were talking about having an arrangement made, and our creative partner, Joshua, who I hope you meet when you're in town, said, well, what about the Mary Lou Williams Zodiac Suite? So I think we all quickly went to, Spotify and YouTube and listened to some recordings, and we're really excited, and then saw your connection with the piece and, of course, APA. So tell me a little bit about maybe your discovery of the piece, its evolution. I mean, you've put a whole lot into your own parts, essentially. And then I just read your message to Amy Lou about the publisher and kind of the initial challenge of this piece that Mary Lou Williams faced herself in the publication process. So, in a nutshell, can you share some of that?
Well, first of all, Mary Lou Williams was a prolific pianist, jazz pianist, composer. And she really was, like I always tell people who are kind of in the classical world who aren't so familiar with sort of the jazz lineage. I say that Mary Lou Williams was to Thelonious Monk and Dizzy Gillespie and Bud Powell what Nadia Boulanger was to many people in the early part of the 20th century, early to mid 20th century. And Mary Lou was a great teacher, and she really was the sort of the catalyst between the early swing era. She played for years with Andy Kirk and his Clouds of Joy out of Kansas City. And she was the kind of the catalyst between that era and the burgeoning style of what they call bebop and beyond. And she kept up with the times and stayed relevant, really artistically, as the music evolved and also as she evolved. And the Zodiac Suite was written in 1944 with her trio. It was a recorded piano, bass, drums for Moash's label, Folkways. And in 45, she had the opportunity to score it for a chamber orchestra. She was at the time friends, and I think they might have even dated with a man named Milton Orant, who was a staff arranger at NBC. And Orant coached her and gave her lessons on orchestration, and so this arrangement of the Zodiac Suite was written for a premiere at the Town Hall in 1945, actually December 31st, New Year's Eve, 1945. The performance was not very strong because, I'm sure many composers today they experience this where there's not enough rehearsal time. You get, how many hours, 2 hours on a piece that's brand new. And there are also issues with copying errors and and some other challenges that came about with this particular arrangement, where Mary Lou was so frustrated with the performance that she shelved the arrangement, and never really saw the light of day. There is a recording that was later released after her death in the 90s of the town hall premiere that you can find. I think it's called the Town Hall Concert 1945 or something like that. And you can hear all of the issues. I mean, sometimes the orchestra is not together, intonation issues. There would be instances where Mary Lou would simply tacit the orchestral parts and cover a whole movement on the piano. So it needed more time. It needed more time, and it also just needed more detail in terms of the parts and the scores, that that there were errors there that needed to be corrected, in the copying work and everything. So just a number of issues that come together. I think maybe about 6-7 years ago, the publisher Jazz Lines Publications, they published this arrangement with the permission of the Mary Lou Williams Foundation. I guess Milton Oren's estate had the parts and the original parts and everything. And so when this was published a few years back, even with the edited version, there were still mistakes there. And the way I found that out was I just kind of scrutinized this chamber ensemble arrangement against her original trio arrangement. And, a lot of times there'd just be accidentals, or there's one movement, Aquarius, that was the way it was barred, meaning like how it's a 4/4, it's cut time. It was barred very strangely, and so it's very hard for musicians, especially orchestral musicians who are used to everything being very clean and clear. It was very hard for them to decipher exactly what was going on. So I tried to work a bit with Rob DeBoff at Jazz Lines. I went over to Saratoga Springs, where their offices are in upstate New York, and we spent a whole afternoon kind of going over things and figuring out what was the intention behind something that was written. Was it meant to be that way, or maybe it was just simply a mistake? So it's been an ongoing process, for going on 2 years now, and some trial and error. Fortunately, I had the opportunity to record it with the Knights Orchestra and Eric Jacobson, conductor and cellist. And Eric has really been behind this project 100%. And honestly, without him and without the Knights Orchestra, I don't know if this project would be as far along as it is now, in terms of realizing really what is the essence of this music and what was Mary Lou really going for. We spent countless numbers of hours rehearsing, and we've had some performances playing certain movements of the Zodiac. And so having that luxury of being able to perform a number of times certain movements and prepare for performances, that's something that is very unusual in the orchestral world. So that was very helpful. The New York Phil actually streamed it. They were the first ensemble to decide that they wanted to actually feature this work, although it was just 4 movements we did. And that was like at the height of COVID, or like when things were just starting to open up a little bit. It's March 2021. And so really that was the start of this whole journey. It's like, if, the New York Phil has some kind of interest in revealing this work. I think it's worth continuing and seeing how it develops. And it's been really overwhelming, the interest that ensembles have had for the piece, and just being curious about what it is. I mean, each movement is a zodiac sign, right? It starts with Aries and ends with Pisces. And Mary Lou employed a number of techniques in each movement to give a certain kind of imagery, if you will, for each of those signs. And those signs are also, those movements, excuse me, were dedicated to certain musicians who held those signs as well. So I think there's just in general, like on a mass scale, there's always interest in the zodiacs signs, and how many people ask you like, "What's your sign?" kind of thing. But I think when you zoom in the lens a bit, with Mary Lou, this piece the suite is really one of her kind of tour de force pieces. I think she's probably most well known for this composition, her trio recordings of it.
Talk to me about the group of musicians that are coming with you, that have been playing this with you with orchestra. It's not something we typically do as a chamber orchestra, to have this sort of setup. So it's kind of exciting, actually.
Well, that's always sort of like a big question mark, how to blend the sounds of American jazz music within the sound world of the orchestral environment. And there have been a lot of people who have attempted it with varying degrees. I'm very lucky to have musicians who understand a bit of that world. For example, David Wong was a classical bass major at Juilliard, and I remember being in a jazz ensemble with him my first year, because he was about 3 years ahead of me, and he was playing bass in this ensemble. And I was like, "I've never seen you in the jazz program." He says, "Oh no, I'm in the classical bass program. That's my major." And after he graduated, he completely devoted his energy and his time to playing jazz. I mean, he's played with greats like Jimmy Heath, Roy Haynes, Charles McPherson. So he's a very seasoned musician, both in the jazz realm, and then also his foundation in the orchestral world is also there. Same with Aaron Kimmel, who plays drums. And what's so challenging in this music is finding drummers who understand all the vocabulary, but are also very sensitive and don't play too loud and overplay the band. And I'm not even talking about with the orchestra. I'm just talking about just general in a small ensemble. So he's incredibly valuable with a piece like this, because when you're playing with strings and winds and everything, I mean, you've got to understand how all of these instruments operate sonically and how you can support them without being overbearing. And he definitely brings that quality to the music. So there are not really many movements that are squarely in the jazz vein or squarely in the classical vein. There's one movement called Virgo right in the middle that is very much harkens to like back to the Kansas City swing sound. But other than that, it's really a kind of a mixed bag. There's one piece, Sagittarius, that really only features the winds. It's kind of a wind ensemble movement. There's a general sound of you can hear the influence on the cinematic sound of that era, kind of the Hollywood sound, if you will, of that era, in the string writing in a piece like, for example, in a movement like Capricorn, which is number 10. So it's hard to really pinpoint what this piece is. And so I'm always really excited to be working with different ensembles and kind of getting their impressions of how to play it, and how best to approach it.
So do you have a favorite movement?
Do I have a favorite movement? You know what? I have to say Libra is probably my favorite movement. And I'm not a Libra, but it's just beautiful, really beautiful melody. And it was also dedicated to the great Ohioan pianist Art Tatum. So yeah, it's probably my favorite.
To your knowledge, did Mary Lou Williams have like a strong connection to astrology, or just was inspired by the theme?
I think during the time, there's a couple of good biographies on Mary Lou, but one was written a few years back by Tammy Kernodle, and it's called Soul on Soul, Soul on Soul. And I think in that one, she talks a little bit about Mary's fascination with astrology, but I'm not 100% sure. Obviously she knew something, she had some interest in it. How deep it was, I'm not quite sure. It's simply that I'm looking forward to being back in Indianapolis and being a part of that great community that's there. And I hope people are able to come out and enjoy the wonderful music of Mary Lou Williams and the Zodiac Suite.
Thank you so much, Aaron. I appreciate your time. Hello again, and welcome to another episode of Mocktails and Masterpieces with the Indianapolis Chamber Orchestra. I'm Dana Stone, the Executive Director, and I'm here today again with Diehl from Milkman's Daughter. We're partnering with Milkman's Daughter as we kick off this new expanded podcast version of Mocktails and Masterpieces. And in celebration of our 40th season and our season opener, which is later this month, we'll be tasting a mocktail that she made with the Zodiac, Mary Lou Williams Zodiac Suite, and Aaron Diehl in mind. So Diehl, please share a little bit about this mocktail that you created.
Yeah, for sure. Of course. I'd love to. So the mocktail that we created, a no GNT. So like we spoke about in the past, I like to really make sure that I take the complexities of spirits in mind, and just take out the alcohol. Like I really wish it were that easy. You know, like here, let me just like sift out like my alcohol and like also the calories when I consume things, but we can't. So I kind of go from the ground up. I know that gin is a juniper forward spirit, so I put some juniper berries in there, and then I really went with like what makes a GNT like taste wise, and also like the mouthfeel. So I added some cucumbers, because if you think of Hendrix, you think of cucumbers. I also use limes and grapefruit. I don't know about you, but anytime I listen to especially like classic music, I just love, it's either bourbon or gin. I don't know what it is, but I'm like, all right, cool. So when this was presented to me, I was like, I definitely want to do a no GNT.
Yeah, this is delicious. I know we talked earlier that gin is not my drink of choice, but I definitely do taste that kind of natural, earthy kind of flavors that, you know, you mentioned with the juniper and pine. You had mentioned that before too. In tasting this, it's definitely complex again, like some of your other beverages that you've made. Like there's a lot of flavor happening, but they're not competing. They're blending so well that I can't identify what they are. Well, thank you. I'm enjoying tasting this, and I hope that you enjoy this upcoming episode with Aaron Diehl, and that you join us at the Indianapolis Chamber Orchestra for our upcoming season. Thank you to Milkman's Daughter, to Diehl, and to Anthony Team Realty for supporting this expansion into our podcast, and for all of our followers for supporting the Chamber Orchestra. We'll see you soon.